for coming this evening. We are particularly fortunate to have an extraordinary guest who, in the midst of Zero Week action, and those I think in this room understand just how complex and crowded the Zero Week schedule is here in Houston, the Minister of Energy and Environment for Greece, His Excellency Stavros Papastavrou. We are delighted to have you, Minister. Very happy. He will be having a dialogue with our director of the Center for Energy Studies, Ken Medl. I'm going to be introducing them, then I'm going to take a seat and have the opportunity for once to listen to other folks talk about what's going on. The discussion this evening is going to focus, of course, on Greece and its role in evolving transatlantic and Mediterranean energy architecture. Now, over the last several years, accelerated by Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, reinforced by the current conflict with Iran, global energy markets have undergone a structural shift, with Europe experiencing the most immediate and, frankly, straitened circumstances and consequences. What was once largely a question of supply adequacy has become a real fundamental question of system design. How do you build energy networks that are resilient to geopolitical disruption, responsive to market signals, capable of supporting long-term investment? Resilience in this context depends on diversification across sources, routes, and contractual structures. Now, this is not a new challenge. We have been dealing with this in one form or another for many, many years. From the challenge of being able to market U.S. LNG, spot market LNG afloat, when Russian pipeline contracts take or pay were no longer market priced, very disadvantageous to the recipients. Those contracts came to a close. Floating LNG made a killing. The Russians got smart, changed their terms. It's a dynamic, evolving world. But I cannot talk about dynamic circumstances without not digressing, but spending a moment to talk about what we know and what we don't know about the conflict in the Gulf with Iran. I would be a far wealthier person than I am were I able to opine with authority on the pronouncements being made almost by the hour by the U.S. president, or for that matter, by Iranian leadership figures, plural. I think you have all been following the news of the president spinning our heads once again, went from a threat to strike energy infrastructure as power stations in Iran within 48 hours from an hour certain that he provided to an announcement that there would be a 5-day pause in any such strikes, while real talks that had already been underway, he declared, made their way to completion. There is much discussion in the international media tonight as we sit here of negotiations with intermediaries from Pakistan, possibly from Turkey, from Qatar. There's a certain degree of sense, theoretically, in any of those three parties playing a role here. Pakistan very much wants to be able to end this conflict, to be able to receive Iranian oil. It's a major supplier for them. Qatar has its own motivations to de-risk itself. I would note Qatar has not been struck by an Iranian ballistic missile or drone since the 19th. An interesting fact which may or may not indicate something significant in terms of Qatar's role with Iran. As for Turkey, they both want to de-risk themselves by not getting caught in this conflict and also want to cultivate closer relationships with the U.S. administration. So we have a possibility of talks, or we have a possibility of nothing happening. I cannot tell you which of the two it is, but I'm certain of one thing. An exit strategy, an off-ramp to this crisis does need to be found. Opening the Strait of Hormuz through kinetic means is a challenge that I and many other analysts believe is likely beyond the practical ability of any party, including the United States, to be able to effect. It is simply too easy for Iran, using a Zodiac boat, a little speedboat, to be able to attack, whether it's successful or not. And by attacking, by the mere attempt to do, raising war risk assuming the war risk could be met right now, which is not a situation that we're in. What has been accomplished in this conflict to date? Well, yes, there are tangible accomplishments. Iran's ability to attack its neighbors, the region as a whole, Israel, with ballistic missiles and drones, has been significantly diminished. Yesterday, the 22nd, was the first day since this conflict began that no ballistic missiles were fired at any Gulf state. Drones there were, at all of them with the exception of Qatar. Israel got ballistic missiles and drones aimed at it. But there is clearly a downward trend line on Iran's stockpiles, willingness to risk their launchers to expose themselves to attack either by U.S. or by Israeli forces. But it isn't reduction to nothing. Iran still possesses the ability to keep the strait closed, still possesses the ability to threaten its neighbors if it chooses, certainly possesses the ability to continue to conduct its campaign against Israel. Whether there is an ultimate elimination of that missile and drone threat that is possible, that is a matter of speculation. My assumption would be no. That you can reduce to a significant level, maybe we're there already, but to eliminate completely, too big a country, too many launchers, too many places to hide, and especially for drones, too easy a product to generate and to be able to launch. So there is a need to bring this down. The nuclear program has been, again, hit very hard in terms of enrichment facilities. That's a good thing. Is Iran willing to strike a deal now, make an arrangement that accounts for the 460 or so kilos of 60% highly enriched uranium? That is to say, to make it accountable to the International Atomic Energy Agency and taken out of the country either for dilution or for disposal? Difficult to say. Will they make a commitment broadly about not engaging in an enrichment program, an indigenous on-territory program? They've denied the willingness to do so in the past. Have circumstances changed? We'll have to see. But certainly accounting for the highly enriched stockpile needs to be part of any deal or arrangement, no matter who it is who articulates a victory that constitutes an end to this affair. And assuming that there is a satisfactory arrangement on the nuclear issue, let's throw in the possibility of an arrangement on ballistic missiles, at least medium and long-range ballistic missile development for a period of time ahead. Where does that leave Iran's funding for its proxies? Hamas, the Houthis, and Hezbollah. That really has not figured very prominently in any of the recent conversations that the media has had about conversations that may or may not have been had by the actual principals involved here. But it does remain another projection of Iranian desire to impose its will, or at least constrain the ability of others to shape what Iran does. So a lot of questions, none of which I can answer for you tonight, really no one else can, which brings us to a place outside Iranian constraint, which is the Eastern Mediterranean. This is an increasingly important, and has been for some years, component of Europe's energy and security architecture. As a southern entry point into Central and Eastern Europe, the region offers the potential to expand supply diversity, resiliency, by combining regional production, LNG imports, and enhanced transmission capacity. The objective is not simply to increase volumes, numbers, but to expand optionality, to enable markets to access energy through multiple pathways and reduce exposure to single-point disruptions, as very dramatically occurred when Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, those conditions underpin liquidity, and they help attract the capital required for long-term infrastructure investment. Within this evolving framework, Greece is assuming a central role. Through the expansion of LNG import and regasification capacity, the development of cross-border interconnectors, and participation in regional cooperation frameworks, notably the Greece-Cyprus-Israel-US 3+1 partnership, Greece is positioning itself as a gateway for diversified energy flows into Europe's post-Russian supply landscape. Decisions around infrastructure, particularly in fossil fuels, will need to account for long-term demand uncertainty, not certainty, and the risk of stranded assets, even as capital is directed towards assets that enhance flexibility, integration, and system resilience. Clear and predictable regulatory frameworks on all parties' part will be essential to sustain momentum and support investment at scale, and I include the U.S. in this as well. Taken together, these developments position Greece not simply as a transit point, but as a system-level actor, linking infrastructure, markets, and policy in ways that will shape the region's energy future. And so, Minister Papastavrou, you bring to your role decades of experience at the intersection of law, finance, and public policy. A graduate of Harvard Law School, I think you're still allowed to receive a visa even though you've been to Harvard. You have spent more than 30 years as a legal advisor in corporate law, capital markets, with experience in both Washington and Athens. You've also held senior roles at the highest levels of your government, including as Minister of State and head of the Prime Minister's Office for European Affairs and International Relations, where you served as Greece's chief negotiator with European partners and the International Monetary Fund during a very pivotal moment in your country's history, and a moment that turned out extraordinarily positive for Greece and for the EU. Earlier in your career, you were deeply engaged in European political cooperation, serving with the European People's Party and related organizations. We're delighted to have you with us, and Ken, over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador. So just to sort of set the stage for our conversation, because Ambassador Satterfield did a really good job of highlighting what is the sort of word of the last 3 weeks, which is uncertainty. There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty affecting global energy markets. You see this every single day with the gyrations we've seen in the prices of crude oil in particular, but also increasingly natural gas. I actually worked on a trade floor when I first finished my doctorate, so I understand the statement, buy the news, sell the fact, and I think you're seeing that quite a bit on a daily basis in the current commodity space. But uncertainty is what drives that, and when markets tighten, drives it even more. The one thing I would say that Iran has revealed, which is not new in the current context, because just to put this into perspective, hopefully you all realize that since 2020, we have had 3 major global supply chain disruptions that have affected energy and other commodities. So the emergence out of COVID, as you move from 2020 into 2021, Russia's invasion of Ukraine was quite significant, and then now the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and potential long-term damage to various energy infrastructures in the region. What this has really highlighted in each case is the importance of resilience in supply chains. When you look at what's going on with regard to the Strait of Hormuz and the conflict in the Persian Gulf, you can see very clearly where some very forward-looking planning that dates all the way back to 1979 with the development of the East-West pipeline across the Arabian Peninsula. One country has been able to flex because it actually had some redundancy. I think that will carry a lot of weight going forward once the conflict settles in terms of how international capital flows into the region, because it's going to remain vital for commodity flows globally, regardless of what happens next. But that brings us to the approach that has been taken with regard to East Med energy resources, the development of them, what Greece could ultimately mean for the European Union as a whole, as a gateway, as the ambassador mentioned. So I wonder if you could comment a little bit on how the approach towards Greece being that gateway for Southern Europe has evolved. Because I know we've had some conversations about legislation that was passed in the United States focused on this back in 2019. So this is not a brand new issue, but it certainly is one that has risen to the fore in terms of energy security dialogue.
First of all, let me thank you for the invitation. I mean, I'm delighted to be here at the Baker Institute. I mean, starting at Cambridge, I always knew about the importance of the Institute and the Rice University, so I'm very happy to be here. The geopolitics of energy, I think, is something that is important for all countries, but especially for the East Med. And you rightly pointed out that Greece has positioned itself, took advantage of its geographical location, which is between 3 continents. And under the leadership of Prime Minister Mitsotakis, since 2019, invested into, went long on gas when people thought that this natural gas was done, was out. Invested in infrastructure, extended Revitusa, created the FSRU on the north, the Trans-Adriatic pipeline, the IGB. So all this network allowed the geographical position to become a geopolitical advantage. And these interconnections now resulted into, from 2019, where Greece were importing 6 BCM, by being a mere destination, another customer, another consumer. Now in 2024, 2025, importing 17 BCM, out of which 11 are going to our neighboring countries. So truly becoming a hub. But at the same time, by investing in natural gas, it concluded, I think, an impressive energy transformation. Greece relied in 2005 to lignite for the production of electricity. Now this from 65 is down to 8 or 5%, and 55% of electricity is coming from the wind, the sun, and hydro. So this energy pragmatism that Greece has evidenced by taking advantage of the wind and the sun, the location, the geographical location, investing in infrastructure, allowed it to become, let's say, one of the leaders in the southeast in terms of energy. Because what the crisis, I think, shows to everyone, together with what the professor said about the importance of diversifying sources and routes, is the importance of every country, to the extent possible, to develop its own energy independence, to develop the resources that it has, in an effort to be more hedged from this new reality, which is the constant instability. And despite the spike in the price of natural gas, Greece retained one of the 6-7 lowest prices in electricity, wholesale electricity in Europe. Why? Because it has 55% coming from renewables. So this has really acted as a hedge. And we are actively pursuing a program of exploring our potential hydrocarbons. 10 days ago, the Greek Parliament enacted the agreements with JV of Stavros and Hellenic Energy, and a few months ago we had the farming agreement of ExxonMobil. So we have two of the most significant energy companies in the world being active in the country, and if hopefully this is a commercially exploitable outcomes, Greece may be in 2030, 32, 33 become a natural gas producer. So Greece is actually taking advantage, exploring the possibility of all possible resources that it has. Not only its location, not only its infrastructure. And in the East Med can really become a new paradigm for the region. Because as you pointed out, Israel, Cyprus, Greece, and the US, they have the platform of the 3+1 initiative, which Veronica. No, it's okay. No, but it's interesting that from the 3+1 initiatives, the one that has taken place is the one on energy, because it demonstrates the importance. And it's not only important for the 4 countries, but it's important for the entire region, because this can be a new model of for the East Med, where abiding by the rules, by creating confidence, by working through trust, reliability, and credibility, marginalizes provocations, marginalizes ambulatory actions. And this region has tremendous geological potential, but has been held back because of the uncertainty of the neighboring relations, creating a paradigm of a lex mercatoria approach, where the only actions that can be tolerated are actions of trust, of playing by the rules. This can really transform the region and allow the region to enjoy the geological advantage that it has.
So I want to pull in something that you mentioned there. So effectively what you've laid out is taking a truly broad portfolio approach to ensuring that energy supply is adequate to fuel the economy. And then, as you mentioned, also provide energy to neighbors, which is something that has certainly happened. Expansion of wind, solar, hydro, reduction of use of lignite, expansion of natural gas in the energy mix. These are not new, right? These are things that are happening in other places as well. I think what's really interesting, though, about what you mentioned is the extent to which this can create greater connectivity for countries in the region. And this is where, something I know we've been really big on comes firmly into play, which is if you're going to unlock private capital so that you actually achieve the kind of scale needed to develop deep, fungible, liquid markets, you need to ensure that regulatory and market designs are compatible. Because if you see a patchwork, if you will, of those kinds of structures, it makes capital incredibly averse to deploying simply because you don't know what might happen at a single point in the value chain. But this also connects to a broader set of issues that I just want to set the stage for, which is it's not just the East Med, and I think you very appropriately characterized it. It's about the region, and there are other initiatives that are ongoing that the 3+1 efforts fit into. So, for example, expansion of the vertical corridor, the IMEC initiative. I wonder if you could talk about those and how it all connects.
You're absolutely right. The regulatory incoherence is a serious disadvantage for any private capital coming. But I think the countries start to realize that where the countries of the vertical corridor, where there has been no culture of working together.
Right.
I remind you that because of the Iron Curtain, some of the countries were on the west, some kind of on the east, and let alone the historic internal fightings that we had in the south, Eastern Mediterranean, Eastern Europe. Now there's a change of culture. I was on Thursday, 5 days ago, in Belgrade. We agreed that the Minister of Energy from Bulgaria, from North Macedonia, Bulgaria, will meet all in May in Greece in order to see how we can harmonize. Serbia wants, which, by the way, is one of the Western Balkans countries where Russia still has a significant influence. Serbia is concluding a connection with Bulgaria, which then through IGB connects with Alexandroupoli. And we have decided that from Thessaloniki, we're going to be connected with North Macedonia. North Macedonia will be connected with Serbia. So all of a sudden, you have, let's say, a square with the four countries. What I'm saying is that each country realize where we used to be a fragmented region, countries of 6 million or 5 million or 1 million, and each being very proud of its heritage, and for good reasons, but interpreting this patriotic proudness as working on your own, because there was no culture of one polity concept. This is changing, and the vertical corridor greatest achievement would be to change this culture, to start thinking as one polity, not replacing your national interest, but adding to your national interest the concept of a polity operating. When you speak about the Peibao, Scandinavia, clearly each country is independent, but there is a concept of a polity, of a broader geographical region which has some basic common underlying interest. That was lacking. So the vertical corridor on energy is actually, in effect, rewiring this region. It's creating these arteries of cooperation, of prosperity.
So let me ask you a question on that before we continue on. To what extent will this fuel new industrial activity? Because I know in Europe there's been a lot of concern about rising energy prices and what that means for the industrial base, particularly in some Western European countries. But do you think that the efforts that are ongoing and the role that Greece will play could potentially fuel an industrial expansion in Eastern Europe in particular?
I think the Prime Minister has been a voice of realism and pragmatism in the overall debate about energy transition, where he was one of the first leaders to point out that we cannot be dogmatic about energy. We need to be technological neutral. We need to be cost effective. We cannot proceed with an agenda that ignores social cohesion, that ignores the competitiveness. Europe has, for a long time, focused on the service industry, thinking that, for example, raw materials or industrialization could be outsourced outside of Europe, and it paid a huge toll on this. And I think now there is a serious discussion about how we would catch up, because with the AI revolution, you do need the critical raw materials that Europe was not interested so much to take advantage. I don't think right now there is any, believe it or not, I would be surprised, and I'm looking at the Deputy Minister, I would be surprised if there is any kind of working group in the EU dedicated on the critical raw materials, which we all know, which everybody in this room knows. What China has succeeded to do when the West was not looking in a way that they operate, and the importance for the AI race of the critical raw material. And Europe does not have still a dedicated initiative or a dedicated funding program in order to be able. So I think the crisis in the Middle East is a very serious wake-up call for all of us. And it can operate as a catalyst to move faster, to diversify more, to be able to understand that we need actually to move aggressively. Europe, to say something positive, they were the first one to react to the Russian aggression, and Europe decided on March 16th, 2025, so 1 year ago, the total phasing out of Russian gas. That was a very bold move. Russian gas has gone from 45 in 2021 to 19% in 2024 to 13% to 25. It will go down to zero. But in order for this to happen, you need to be able, regulatory-wise, for the countries of the vertical corridor to be able to have a coherence so the US LNG could replace the Russian gas. So Europe sometimes is working on a two-ways approach. They were in a panel with Dita Jorgensen, and she was very clear about the support of the European Commission in moving ahead in the regulatory harmonization. But I will tell you something that the Serbian minister told me. We have a frame of cooperation which is called Energy Community, which is a framework operating through Vienna of countries that are interested in the southeast. Greece is one of them. Actually, Greece created this initiative, the Energy Community, in order to prepare the EU, the European countries that they were not members of the EU, to prepare them for regulatory harmonization in advance, which would allow them to be easier incorporated in the EU. And Bulgaria and Romania were initial members of the Energy Community, and now they become members of the European Union. So Serbia told me that they have completed their harmonization and they have done all the work in order for them to be integrated in the European energy system. But the European Commission does not have still a process of how to include Serbia, which is not a member of the EU, into the European energy system. So that shows that Europe everyone should move faster. The US should move faster. Greece should move faster. Because there's no time for delay. There's no time for delay.
I 100% agree with you. In fact, I'm looking at Michelle because she did some work with us for her
I met
retirement.
in Riyadh. In Riyadh, you saw how many countries from all around the world were present.
104.
And very few from the European Union.
Well, Europe, just to comment on that, I guess, I think Europe thinks they have a plan.
Yeah, so I was, one of the things that's missing.
When it comes, because Greece is a good EU member state. I want to say that in terms of the Russian gas phasing out, Europe was the first one to take the decision with a serious cost, and you had member states which this decision meant a serious impact to their society, and they still did take the decision. So, I think it would be fair to say that Europe has a plan, maybe on some issues, not the perfect one.
Well, I was specifically referring to metals and critical minerals.
There,
right? So
there you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting because
You know why though? Because there are only few countries in Europe, in the European Union that do have critical raw materials.
Right.
I think there are 4 or 5. So that maybe is a reason for.
Yeah, we've increasingly heard from other European leaders who have come through the Baker Institute over the last few months concern about reliance on China and Chinese-dominated supply chains. So that is not unique to the United States. It is something that is shared, I would argue, globally. And it's been interesting to, I want to come back to IMEC because of this, but it's been interesting to see some of the actions the U.S. government's taken with trying to bring peace to the Congo and the conflict with the Rwandan rebels and negotiating access to the Copper Belt, thinking about, through engagement through MP materials with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to develop processing capability. You start to put that together and you think about IMEC, which is the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. You start to see how things begin to connect to create supply chains that are basically competing with the Belt and Road, if you will,
In essence.
Initiative that China led. But Greece plays a critical role in that because you're sort of
And the 3+1, for me the 3+1 is one part that can be connected with the IMEC initiative.
Absolutely.
And be connected with the vertical corridor.
Right.
So it's, let's say, in the epicenter of this new architecture, of this new commercial route from India up to Central Europe.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that because that's certainly a view that we share. The discussion we've had so far is focused on electric power and natural gas. I'm glad we've gotten into critical minerals and materials because that is, even if you don't have a massive rapid energy transition, we can't get away from the fact that we still need materials and minerals and metals. This isn't going away, right? But the role that the Eastern Med could play in expanding those supply chains, in bringing depth into those markets, which is severely lacking. You're talking about incredibly opaque markets generally, which is an impediment to capital flowing in. So there's a lot of things that the region, I think, can bring to the table as we sort of look forward. But one more question before I turn it over, because we're going to take a few minutes.
I just want to say for the 3+1,
Sure.
It's important that the U.S. and the current administration is putting a lot of emphasis to this, because it's not, as I said, the importance for the members, the 4 countries, but it creates a paradigm. It's not only for the 4 countries, it's not only with the IMEC or the vertical corridor, but it creates a paradigm of how working closely in energy. And if you put under energy technology which you should, and shipping, that you start broaden this bridge of cooperation,
Yes.
and you create actually a highway of cooperation. So I think, and I would like to, to thank the administration for pushing ahead on the 3+1 on energy, because I think it has a potential transformative result in the whole region.
So you just answered the question I was going to ask.
That's what I want to say.
What role will the U.S. continue to play in deepening the transatlantic energy cooperation?
I think, first of all, I think energy is a bridge on the transatlantic relations. I think the US and the EU may disagree on some areas, which is natural between allies, but energy is a bridge that brings them together. Energy is an area where they agree they're fully aligned on phasing out the Russian gas. Energy is an area that they fully agree that can be part of the 5% NATO expense energy infrastructure. So I think energy plays a role of bringing closer the EU and the US, and Greece is a strong supporter of this. Now, in terms of the future, I believe that with the vertical corridor being developed, with the 3+1 being maturing, energy can be, let's say, the leading factor of bringing peace and stability and prosperity in the region.
I agree with you. I'm going to ask you guys for questions if you have them, but I do have one point I want to raise. Peter Hartley and I actually published a piece in the Energy Journal, peer-reviewed economics journal, that we examined what would happen if Russian gas flows to Europe were cut off. We published this in 2009, so it's been a while ago, right? But it was motivated by the pressure reductions in 05, 06, and 08, 09. And one of the things that we noted happened with an extended cutoff was you saw investment begin to flow to diversify the energy portfolio in Europe. And two of the places that you've already seen interest, obviously Northwest Europe, LNG import capabilities expanded there, but the other one was actually in Greece. So I actually went back and looked at that paper. Because it was, yeah, wow. We published this back in 2009. So it was an interesting, that's before shale had taken off. The U.S. was not an exporter. So you had responses on different margins, but it was truth to the lesson that diversification is.
I would be interested to read it.
Absolutely. So I want to turn it over for a couple of questions. If you have them, please raise your hand. Chris.
Thank you, Minister, for visiting us here. Obviously, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Turkey. You mentioned that the sort of common energy strategy is bringing together North Macedonia, it's bringing Serbia, it's bringing a group of countries that otherwise had not worked together. So far, to my understanding, Turkey has viewed the 3+1 as a threat. Do you see a pragmatic way where that changes?
Turkey seeing it differently, or?
Yeah, or joining forces, or figuring out a way to play nice.
Listen, this is up for Turkey to decide. I think the region cannot tolerate use of force or threat of use of force as a way of interacting. And Turkey with the existing threat that it has by the Turkish parliament decision, and the way that it views its, the way that it considers the best way to protect their interests, which is an aggressive tone, a provocative, a threat of use violence. If you don't, this, for me, this is not the way to interact and to take advantage and create stability and development in the region. So I think in the end, it's up for Turkey to decide which way it will operate, which way it will develop. It's not for the 3+1, and clearly the 3+1 is not anything. Is not a platform that excludes. It's a platform that creates a way of operating, and allows for the whole region to benefit from it. Threats of use of violence is not the way to go for the development of the region.
Ted?
The Prime Minister mentioned recently the possibility of adding small nuclear reactors to the mix. This is something that Greece has resisted for a while, among other reasons because of the earthquake zone, right, that the country is in. I was wondering if you have any thoughts about where this might be going.
To be absolutely accurate, he said that he's willing to explore and examine the advantages of the SMR. And you're right, Greece has been very reluctant to be open to this because of the past history, but now with the technology developing and creating these new SMRs and technology that is far more safer, I think the Prime Minister, again, being a voice of energy pragmatism, said the obvious, that we should be exploring all possible means for the energy mix. And I think one of the mistakes that Europe should admit that they did, not only believing that the cheap energy from Russia was really cheap, because as we saw it was not secure, so therefore it's not cheap, not even considering that they were secure when they were fully dependent to one source. But one thing that Europe did was that they forgo the advantage they had on nuclear energy. So I think the Prime Minister is very pragmatic. He said that we should be exploring and we should be following, and we should not be starting to examine when everything is operational, because that may be too late. So he was, and let me tell you, this is not a very necessarily popular position, but it's a pragmatic and responsible position. So yes, he opened this debate in the public discourse, and as a ministry with my deputy, we will be following closely all the developments of the SMRs, as we should.
So expand the portfolio, expand optionality.
Expand portfolio, expand optionality.
Absolutely. Yes?
So the intention between your country, Israel, the 3+1, everything, is there for cooperation and building better relationships. But I also think about what we keep talking about, right? That was also the intention of Nord Stream originally, right? Bring Russia closer to Europe and then prevent, future bellicose actions. So how do you think about risking the risk that you're, maybe giving a future prime minister of another country leverage over assets in your economy with the need to come closer?
I mean, with the Nord Stream, we found out that our supplier weaponized energy. And I think with the 3+1, especially because of the countries involved, there is a very stable framework of cooperation that does not allow anyone to monopolize or to weaponize. No one has the leverage to do so. Actually, everybody has the incentive for the initiative to be deep, to be as deep as possible and as broad as possible. And if you have the three countries in the US working together on energy in the East Med, on new technologies, on the geopoliticals of energy, I think that creates a very stable framework that does not allow any of the countries, even if one of the countries gets a leadership that wants to violate this, it does not allow any country to arrive into the outcome that we had with Russia weaponizing energy after the invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, I would add to that, and we've done a lot of work on this over the years, but when you introduce optionality into a particular marketplace, you actually reduce the risk of hegemonic intent inflicting major harm. And so
hegemonic is the correct word.
Yeah, so that's where this 3+1 can actually bear significant benefit. So I have time for one more question. I think you.
Yeah, thank you, James Curtis. I'm an energy lawyer here, and a member of HEPA. Actually, I have
Great.
a fact and a question. Fact: the very first shipment of LNG that went to Greece came from Corpus Christi, Texas. Question is more domestic, about modernization of the Greek grid. Everybody here loves to spend the summer on the islands. And you have some unique challenges that your demand is seasonal, that everything moves to the islands in summertime and then back to the mainland in the wintertime. What is being done to modernize the grid to deal with this need of flexibility with demand as it moves?
You're absolutely right. That's a huge challenge. And starting 2019, the Greek government has been, until then, around 400 million euros were spent every year for the grids. Now it is 4 times more. And to tell you a fact, Crete hasn't been connected electrically with the mainland until 2025. So Crete, for 204 years, did not have a connectivity with the mainland. And the same thing goes for the Dodecanese and the North Aegean. IPTO, which is the national organization, is doing actually now, as we speak, a capital increase of 1 billion in order to be able to deploy an investment program of 10 billion for the next 5-6 years in order to enhance the grids and connect all the islands with the mainland. So you're right, one of the big challenges going forward, not only for Greece, but for Europe, hence the grid package that was presented in December by the Commission and discussed last Monday in the Council of Ministers. The grids are an important, the internal European diversification, having the interconnections in Europe to be able to take advantage take advantage of what the North has or what the South has, or what the nuclear has in the middle of the Central Europe. Europe needs to have a true internal single European energy market, which it doesn't right now. And Greece needs to complete the connection of all its islands, which we hope to be doing in the next few years.
Yeah, connectivity matters. It presents tremendous reliability advantages, so it's good to hear. I know you've been on 2 panels already at Zero Week, so thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.